Yo, what's going on, people? It's your boy Huncho, back at you again with another video. So this next story we're about to get into takes place in Washington. No, not Washington DC, Washington Tyne and Ware. Apologies if I said that wrong. And for you guys who don't know where that is pretty much Newcastle. Now, I know some of you guys watching this right now, you might be under the age of 16, so you might not be able to relate to this, but then again, some of you might, and that is a friendship turned sour. Now, I'm not talking about you having a fight at school for you younger viewers, or maybe you fall out with someone over something petty and then make up in a week or so. I'm talking about a long-time friend, maybe you've known for over 10 years or so, and you've ended up becoming enemies over arguments about money, or girls, or just general snaky behavior. And sometimes, depending on where you live, it could even end up being what area you're from. Again, it's a real shame that long-time friends can fall out over things like this, and unsurprisingly, a lot of the time, the people involved in the dispute normally end up acting out upon the sour relationship, and a lot of the time, people end up badly hurt or even dead. And this next story we're about to get into follows a sour relationship. In October of 2019, a man known as Darren March had been shot in broad daylight after an altercation with another man known as John Dees outside the one-stop shop on Blue House Lane in Washington. Emergency services arrived at around 2 p.m. and a section of the road where two cars were parked was cordoned off. He was rushed to hospital, and after a few days he remained in critical but stable condition. And 2 days after the incident, police would go on to arrest John Dees of no fixed address and would go on to charge him with attempted murder and possession of a shotgun with intent to endanger life. Within that time, the shotgun that was used by John had been found by police. In a brief court hearing after his arrest, no application for bail was made and he was remanded into custody. And it was heard at that hearing that the sawn-off shotgun had caused damage to Darren March's chest, ribs and liver. After a trial was preparing to go ahead, in January of 2020, John Dees would go on to admit attempted murder, possessing a shotgun with intent to endanger life, and criminal damage at Newcastle Crown Court, where he was due to be sentenced in April of 2020, but due to further medical evidence being sought out, they had to postpone the date of the sentencing. Judge Paul Sloan QC said John will be back in court via video link to be sentenced on May the 15th, 2020, going on to say, "I'm going to adjourn your case until May the 15th, 2020, and you will be produced over the live link as you have been today. You must attend the live link room. If you refuse to do so, the sentence hearing could proceed in your absence. You understand you will receive a significant custodial term in any event." So the sentencing day would be held today on the 15th of May 2020, and more in-depth details about what happened leading up to the incident would be told to the court. The prosecution would go on to say the case arises from a dispute between the defendant and a man called Darren March, who both lived in Washington at the time. They were former friends. Their relationship soured in the spring of 2019, arguments over women and money appearing to lie behind the fallout. Text messages were shown from Darren's phone to the court, and the prosecution would continue. Text messages subsequently recovered from Darren March's mobile telephone reveal all to have been well in March of 2019, with friendly exchanges between the two men. However, their relationship had by August descended into name-calling, abuse and threats of violence. And recovered exchanges from the 5th of August 2019 include the defendant accusing Mr. March of sleeping with his girlfriend as his father lay dying and threatening his child. In response, Darren March denied making any threats to John's child and said that the defendant had pulled an axe on him. They continued to trade insults, both calling each other pedo and nonce, and the defendant saying it was only going to end up one way, and that was Darren being put in the ground. In another message, John said that he would not be calling the police, adding, "You're going to get killed on the spot." On August the 6th, John had then sent Darren a message telling him to keep looking over his shoulder, as one day he'd be there and it would be pop pop. On August the 7th, another message from John read, "You went from threatening Ben to threatening me ma'am, and you think I'm not gonna kill you." In response to that text message, Darren had went on to say, "Go and get your spud gun or potato gun and stop texting him." Over the period of August the 5th to August the 7th, 2019, around 450 text messages were passed between the two men, 275 from John and 192 from Darren, all very much of the same context. The only other recovered messages were from the 23rd of August, where John stated that he would have been happy to have left it and that March was not worth the jail time, and the only response from Darren was lol. So that leads us up to the events of the day of the shooting. On October the 10th, 2019, Darren March and his friends were planning to go for a bike ride. They had loaded their bikes into Darren's blue transit van. The prosecution went on to say at around the same time as they were loading their bikes into the van, between 1:40 p.m. and 1:50 p.m, CCTV shows the defendant to have been driving around Washington in convoy with another vehicle, a black VW Golf, himself driving his own black VW Sirocco. The Sirocco was originally silver in colour, but at that time it was bearing a black vinyl wrap and was caught on a number of cameras between 1:18 p.m. and the shooting just over half an hour later at 1:52 p.m. At 1:41 p.m, the defendant and the occupants of the Golf were at the Jet garage, where one of the two males then got into the passenger seat of John's vehicle. The remaining male stayed in the car and was driving behind them in the Golf as they pulled away from the petrol station onto Blue House Lane. Within minutes, Darren March's van was captured by cameras at the same garage. He's seen filling up, and the vehicle, being driven by his friend, then pulled away at 1:46 p.m, also onto Blue House Lane. Within a minute, cameras captured the defendant's vehicle turning off Blue House Lane into the tyre spot, the blue van then pulling up just beyond, and a very brief exchange appearing to take place. The van then pulled away and was followed by the defendant along Blue House Lane. When the van stopped near Washington Auto's garage, the defendant pulled up behind and figures can be seen to briefly leave the van. Darren March told his friends that it was John Dees and that there was trouble between them, stating he would get out and smash him. Both vehicles turned left onto Heathworth Road. John then drove across a grassed area where the VW Golf had appeared to be waiting for him, and both vehicles then headed off together back along Heathworth Road. Over the next few minutes, the three vehicles orbited a loop around Heathworth Road, Coverdale Avenue, Weardale Avenue and Blue House Lane, at times passing close to John's home address. At 1:52 p.m, the blue van then turned left off of Weardale Avenue onto Blue House Lane, with John following behind, and the Golf was no longer present. The prosecution continued. The blue van pulled in just beyond the junction and the defendant again stopped behind them, at which point Darren March told his friends he was going to sort him out. Both he and a friend approached Dees, who was leaning across to the passenger side of his vehicle. Darren March had told John to get out and threw a bottle of water through the open window of the car, and the bottle passed straight through the front of the vehicle and out of the driver's side window. John did not get out but was revving the engine of the car and told Darren to come closer, and despite warnings from his friends, he did. It was then that John produced a shotgun and shot Darren in the chest at point blank range through the open window. Expert analysis of the recovered shot and damaged clothing put the gun muzzle distance in the region of 50 to 150 centimeters from Darren at the time of firing. A passing couple had seen Darren and his friend arguing with someone in a black vehicle and then heard a shot which caused one of the males to fall to the ground. They then, much to their credit, turned the vehicle around and went to the aid of Darren March, noticing that John had pulled away from the scene and drove out of view. The prosecution would go on to say, appreciating the gravity of the situation, the couple took the view that they would have to drive Darren March straight to the hospital, managing to get him there into the rear of the vehicle, assisted by his friend who travelled with them to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Gateshead, ringing ahead to warn them of their imminent arrival. They arrived at 2:12 p.m. and Darren March had received emergency treatment. He was found to have a large gunshot wound to his right chest and arm. His right lung had collapsed, he had broken ribs, and 550 millilitres of blood was drained from his chest. Pellets were also found to have penetrated his liver and colon with associated bleeding. His injuries were considered to have been life-threatening and required significant surgery to reconstruct when assessed by Home Office pathologist Dr. Jennifer Bolton on the 14th of October 2019. As Darren March was undergoing life-saving surgery, John had set about trying to dispose of the evidence. He drove to fence houses where he and several associates were seen stripping the black vinyl covering from the VW Sirocco, revealing the original silver cover. This happened around 5 p.m. within a few hours of the shooting. Earlier the same day, around 11:30 a.m, CCTV cameras had captured John Dees buying 2 packs of Stanley blades at a local hardware store, items it's alleged he obtained with a view of disguising his vehicle after he planned his attack on Darren March. When John was arrested at the home of an associate, he had shaved off his hair and his beard, and when officers searched the house on Gill Street South, they found an imitation revolver, a spent shotgun cartridge and an air pistol. Next door, At that stage, unoccupied but being renovated for his associate's daughter, police had found the shotgun that was used by John. The gun was in a rucksack from which a number of shotgun cartridges were also recovered. Of course, the hearing was today, the 15th of May 2020, and he was then sentenced to 21 years after that hearing, and in passing sentencing, Judge Paul Sloyne QC said to John, "You had been telling the injured party to come closer to your vehicle, and by this stage, you had undoubtedly formed an intention to kill him. Once he was next to the passenger side of the car, you produced a shotgun at very close range, and you shot him in the chest." The judge added, "This occurred in broad daylight in a public street, witnessed by members of the public who were passers-by at the time." And that's the story of a friendship gone sour, and fortunately for Darren, he survived in this incident. Now again, I can only go off what evidence was given in court, but it does seem like these guys were going back and forth for a while, and this is why I say that if you have got a friend and things go sour, just try and make it up, and try not to escalate it to the point where potentially that person actually wants to go and kill you, because again, like I said at the start of the video, people fall out over money, they fall out over women, and it seems like in this case, that was the case. But let me know what you guys think of this in the comment section below. Give the video a little like, and if you want the latest drill, street and music news out of the UK, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your boy Huncho, and I'm out.